My name's Lochlin Cross. I'm joined by my buddy Mark, who owner-operator of an Edmonton-based business, Trifecta Electrical Solutions. This is a three-part podcast series about your business. So let's do the beginnings, like where you got started. Why did you become an electrician?
Well, I was one of those guys that's been thrown out of school a few times. My post-secondary career was definitely lackluster, and my parents just kind of gave up on me. And I was sitting around one day, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Like, I got to do something. I was a parts man at a car dealership at the time, and my little brother's like, if I was to do anything else, I think I'd go back to school and become an electrician. And I'm like, wow, an electrician. They seem like they have a good job. Like, not, I didn't want to shovel shit my entire life.
Yeah.
Like I did in the pig barns and stuff as a kid, but. Yeah, so I started looking around, and we were living in Peterborough, Ontario at the time, and my now wife was my girlfriend at the time, and her uncle had a plumbing company. I said, well, shit, I'll become a plumber. And, whatever.
Speaking of shit.
Yeah, the good old turd technician, So I phoned him up, and he's like, I don't take on apprentices. I don't do those types of things. I'm just kind of a one-man band. And I said, his kids were younger than me, and he said, if they're going to do anything, I'll have them. So I'm like, well, crap, what am I going to do? So at the time, I think it's 2005, something like that. And I said to Bern, I said, listen, Alberta's booming. They're screaming for people. You see, reading.
What year was that?
2005. We moved here in 2006.
That's when I got here too, and it was a boom.
Oh, it was nuts. Like, I couldn't buy tools at Rona on a Friday evening because there was no staff.
Yeah, you couldn't buy a house.
No, yeah, right. We couldn't find an apartment to live in. Like we weren't.
It was nuts.
There.
Yeah.
I remember they had $700 signing bonus at 7-Eleven. I phoned my buddy. I'm like, get out here! You get $700 just to work at 7-Eleven for 6 months. Like, what are you doing? Anyways, so I wasn't an electrician until I moved here, and I had met my cousin. Lived next door to a guy who owned the company, had just started it. I think it was maybe a year or 2 years old. And he said he'd hire me right on the spot. So I got a transfer from the dealership that I was working for there to Derek Dodge out here. And we drove out to see what Alberta or Edmonton was like, because we had no idea whatsoever. And by the time I got home, we had decided that we're going to make this move, and this is going to be the best thing for us. And my company in Ontario knew that I was applying for work out here before I even got back. So that's how I became an electrician. I was trying to find a career that was going to make some legit money over working at a car dealership and that kind of thing. And I knew like we were going to have kids and that kind of stuff. So I had to step up my game, and I wasn't really didn't really have a direction till then.
There was literally a convoy to Alberta from different parts of the country at that time, right?
Yeah.
I ended up here in 2006 too because of the boom, obviously. Yeah, it was crazy.
It was.
So what year did you get started with Trifecta Electrical Solutions?
Okay, 2013 is when we incorporated. We started off by doing side work in the beginning, after work and
so now you've been here like a couple of years, but you've done your sort of your journeyman or whatever,
correct,
apprenticeships. You got into it, and then all of a sudden you're working for this company.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had just to bridge the gap. So we moved here. I quit Derek Dodge a few months after we had moved here. Got my first job as an electrician, and I did my apprenticeship with that entire company.
Okay.
Super well-rounded. I did a lot of commercial, residential service work, and I had a really nice service job with them when I quit.
Okay. All right. There you go. And the company started 2013, like we said. Were you one of the original owners of Trifecta?
Yeah. So everybody in Trifecta, when they started, we're Trifecta because there's 3 partners.
Okay, there you go. Look at us.
Yeah.
Doing math.
So the one fella, he was an owner of the company that I had worked for and had done my apprenticeship with, and he was having trouble with his other 2 partners, and he sold his shares and walked away. Signed a non-compete, and then the other fella, he was a residential guy. He'd worked in a lot of condos and multifamily dwellings, and that was his specialty. And my role was to handle some of the smaller commercial tenant improvements, things like that, and service department.
Okay.
So we had residential, commercial, and then my role as
the service guy.
Yeah. Exactly. Smaller projects and things like diagnosing, troubleshooting, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Now we're going to get into in the next series. We're going to get more into, the overall structure of the company and how you ended up running it yourself completely. But what's the hardest thing so far about being a business owner working on your own?
Boy, that's a loaded question. There is a lot of challenging things.
Yeah.
I came from being very much a man in the van to not knowing how to quote anything when the other partners kind of walked away. Just learning how to reinvent myself was super challenging.
Yeah.
Didn't know how to do a spreadsheet. Didn't know how to attach something to my email. Like I'm not even exaggerating that. That was how it was. And I look back and I'm amazed we're still here going through all of that. The biggest challenge, I think, to date overall, I think, was COVID for me. And for a lot of the tradespeople, COVID was good to a lot of tradespeople. People decided to renovate. They if you were in that renovation space, you were busier than busy, no matter what the prices were. Prices, we all know, were crazy through the roof for material and that type of thing.
Yeah.
So for me, being locked by myself in we work out of our basement suite. We used to rent our suite in our house, and I said like, I'm done with the renter. Let's move our office down there.
Yeah.
And that's been a great thing. Well, now I'm tied to my home really, but but I didn't realize what negative headspace I was in, how negative I really had become. It was brutal. I had burned a few clients that I really didn't want to burn, but I was paralyzed with fear as far as, communicating with people and just being out there and trying to look at jobs. Sometimes I go look at a job and I would just clam up and
Really?
Yeah, I couldn't handle being around others. And it's not like I was afraid of the disease or getting it, because I've had it. Well, they've been confirmed 3 times that I've had it. And each time was a bit of a cold, I guess, or, I didn't think it was anything out of the ordinary other than you couldn't go anywhere and it was super disruptive. But, so, and I didn't realize till about a year later. So I come out of COVID and we're allowed to start speaking to people and doing things. And I went to a networking event and I ran into a friend of mine who's an accountant. He's actually my accountant. And we shook hands and my anxiety just took right over. And I'm not an anxious person. Like I'm not that kind of, I don't usually have that kind of thing. And I just about fell down, like passed right out. Just shaking this fella's hand. And I've known him for years and years.
Yeah.
So that was super weird. And that's when I realized that I'm like, wow, you are not right. There's something really bad going on. And since then I've really adapted a lot different lifestyle, but how we all did, we ate and drank a little bit too much the entire thing. And I'm as bad as anyone else. So I think that contributes to it. Yeah. And I'm a pretty social guy, as like to go out and see people and this wasn't good for me. I just really negative.
You know what? I've talked to a lot of people, and it's funny you said you're a social person. Like I'm an introvert. And so when COVID happened, I remember I had to catch myself because I was like, okay, this isn't having the impact it's having on me that I'm seeing in my family and friends. And, it's really getting to people, the whole thing for whatever reason. And you kind of nailed it. It wasn't that you were scared about losing your life from the disease, but what we were going through was causing a great deal of stress, and you took it on, right?
I did, yeah.
And you probably, and again, you probably weren't even aware of it until, after the fact.
That's exactly right. You hit it right on the head. And I internalized it. My wife brought it up. She said, like, we didn't even know that was going on with you. Like, we could see that you were stressed and your negative attitude towards everything, but we didn't really see the big picture of internalizing stress and where
How are you coping now?
I think just fine. Everything seems to be back to normal. Since then, looking back though, I have made some big changes, like losing weight, better health, that kind of thing. But also forcing myself, if I find I'm in a negative spin, it's about positive attitude.
Yeah,
trying to maintain that positive attitude. I know you've mentioned it. We've talked quite a few times about dwelling in that negative space. And first for me was realizing that I was in that negative space.
Yeah,
it was just maybe just a slow demise. I can't even really analyze it. But I haven't had any anxiety since. Good for you. Or you get a little bit pissed off at things, but nothing like it was where you're paralyzed with fear or procrastination to the point where nothing happens. You know what I mean? Just letting it kill itself. kind of thing. And
well, and you know what? It's good that you have the self-awareness now to look back and realize what it was you were going through and take the steps to pull yourself out of it. But I still run into people that are still living in that moment where all they can talk about is what happened, why they're angry, who they're angry at, and they're not moving on. Right. So I know you, and I know that you've kind of dealt with your anger and your anxiety and your issues revolving around what you went through during COVID, and you're doing your best to move on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And everybody has a different sort of perspective. And I got to say, I think if I had been self-employed like I am now,
Yep.
during COVID, I don't know if I would have come out of it like I did. Right.
Yeah, I was dealing with a bunch of other things from the company. It was my third year kind of between business partners and learning everything. So we were getting some traction, but not enough traction. There's a whole other elements that kind of think played into that overall.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I this morning I got up and there was instantly 3 negative things that happened, and I just regroup. Do 10 push-ups and let's get our positive attitude back, right? Like we
Good
got
for you.
good
Good
things
for you.
going on. I mean, it's self-awareness, like you said, and I didn't realize at the time what we were going through. And it's the first time I'd ever experienced it. Like I'd never felt anxious about things in my life.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's funny when we talked about doing this podcast series for Trifecta Electrical Solutions.
Yeah.
Your business. You've been doing this for 10 plus years now.
Yep.
I asked you to send me some notes. I did a little bit of research on your company, right? Like you sent me a bunch of stuff that you've built over the years about the company.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you sent me this sort of rough timeline, and there was like the start of the company, and then there was the middle struggle, and then there was the last 3 years, and there was this sort of through line of it's difficult to be self-employed. It is. But you're sort of at a point with the company where you have to be proud about where you are and what you've accomplished, and the fact that you're still doing this 10 years later.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point. The timeline, I wasn't sure exactly what you wanted, and so I think I just wrote down like, here's some of the highlights in my head. Here's how the history went.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, 10 years later, it's amazing. It's been 10 years, to be honest. So I had partners for 5. So this is starting my 6th year. With me on my own, yeah. So really, we're kind of like a 10-year-old startup, if you want to think of it that way, right?
Yeah.
We've done all the good, we've done all the bad, and everything kind of in between. Yeah. But yeah, it's been one hell of a thing. And like one of my wholesalers, my favorite wholesaler, my sales rep, he's like, Mark, I don't know if you're just stupid or stubborn, and he tells me that on a regular basis, but he's a little bit of A, a little bit of B, maybe, maybe a lot of A.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap up here for this first episode.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into another episode here. And the second is going to sort of concentrate on why Trifecta is the company you want to call for your next project. So we're going to break down what it is that the company does. But that's been the first episode of our 3-part series on Trifecta Electrical Solutions. And if you're looking for any information, you want to hire them, you want to find out what they do for you, go to trifectaelectrical.ca and check out the webpage.
You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook.
There you go. Where this podcast series will be living as well.
Yeah, fantastic. This is awesome.